I used to believe that nothing truly strange could happen in a place so quiet. Places like deep forests, small lakes, and old wooden cabins always seemed peaceful to me. They were the kinds of places people escaped to when they wanted silence. But sometimes silence hides things. Sometimes silence is watching you. 3 years ago, my friend Daniel invited me to spend a weekend at a cabin his uncle owned somewhere deep in the woods. The cabin sat beside a large lake that hardly anyone knew about. According to Daniel, the place was perfect if you wanted to get away from the city for a few days. No internet, no cell service, just forest, water, and silence. At the time, it sounded perfect. Looking back now, I wish we had never gone. The drive took nearly 4 hours. The last part of the trip was the strangest. The paved road slowly turned into a narrow gravel path and eventually into nothing more than a dirt road cutting through thick pine trees. The deeper we drove into the forest, the darker it became. Tall trees surrounded the road on both sides, blocking most of the sunlight. It felt like we were driving into a place that the outside world had forgotten. Finally, after nearly 20 minutes on that dirt road, the trees suddenly opened into a small clearing. And there it was, the cabin. It stood near the edge of a lake, built entirely from dark wooden logs. A small porch faced the water, and a narrow wooden dock stretched out into the lake. At first glance, the place looked beautiful, but there was something about the lake that made me uncomfortable. The water was too still. It looked like black glass. The surface barely moved, even though a light wind was blowing through the trees. Daniel parked the car and stepped out. "Pretty nice, right?" he said. I nodded slowly, still staring at the lake. "Yeah," I said, "but the water looks deep." Daniel laughed. "My uncle says the lake is really deep in the middle. Nobody really swims here." That should have been the first warning. Inside, the cabin was small but cozy. 2 bedrooms, a living room with a stone fireplace, and a small kitchen. It looked like nobody had visited in months. Dust covered most of the furniture, and the air smelled like old wood. We spent the afternoon cleaning and opening the windows. Eventually, the cabin felt warm and comfortable. By evening, the sky had turned dark blue, and a thin layer of fog began forming over the lake. Daniel and I walked down to the dock to watch the sunset. The forest around us was strangely quiet. No birds, no insects, nothing. Just the faint sound of water touching the wooden boards beneath our feet. Daniel picked up a small stone and tossed it into the lake. The stone disappeared with a soft splash. Ripples spread across the surface for a few seconds before fading away. Then the lake became perfectly still again. "Creepy place," Daniel joked. I laughed, but something about the silence made me uneasy. That night we made a small fire outside the cabin and cooked simple food. For a while everything felt normal, but around midnight something changed. The wind stopped. The forest became completely silent. It was the kind of silence that makes your ears ring. Eventually, we went inside and went to bed. My room faced the lake. I remember waking up sometime in the middle of the night. At first, I thought it was just a dream. Then I heard it again, water moving, not like waves, not like wind. Something heavier, something large, slowly shifting beneath the surface of the lake. I sat up in bed and listened carefully. The sound came again, a deep movement in the water. My heart began to race. I walked to the window and slowly pulled the curtain aside. Moonlight covered the lake in pale silver light. For a moment everything looked calm. Then I saw it, a ripple forming in the center of the lake. Not a small ripple, a large one, as if something enormous had just moved beneath the surface. I stared at the water for nearly a minute. Then the ripple slowly disappeared. The lake returned to being perfectly still. The next morning, Daniel woke me up early. "Come outside," he said. "You need to see this." We walked down to the dock together. At first I didn't understand what he was looking at. Then I noticed the footprints, wet footprints. They started at the edge of the water, then continued along the wooden dock. but halfway across the dock, they stopped. There were no footprints going back into the lake, and none continuing on to land. It was as if something had stepped out of the water and then vanished. Daniel stared at them in silence. "Did you come out here last night?" he asked. I shook my head slowly. "No." We both looked back at the lake. The water was completely still, but suddenly the entire place felt different, like we weren't alone anymore. That afternoon, we decided to take the small rowboat out onto the lake. Looking back now, that was probably the worst decision we made. The farther we rowed from the shore, the darker the water became. Soon it looked almost black. I leaned over the side of the boat and tried to look down. I couldn't see anything beneath us, just darkness. Then Daniel suddenly stopped rowing. "Do you see that?" he whispered. At first I saw nothing. Then something moved beneath the boat. A shadow. A massive shadow, long and wide, drifting slowly through the water. Neither of us spoke. The shadow passed directly beneath the boat. For a moment, I had the horrible feeling that it was looking up at us. Then it disappeared into the darkness below. We returned to the cabin before sunset. Neither of us talked much that evening. Around midnight, I woke up again, this time because of a sound. Knocking. Knock. 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 But the sound wasn't coming from the door. It was coming from the wall facing the lake. Then I heard footsteps outside. Slow footsteps moving across the wooden porch. My heart began pounding. The footsteps stopped directly outside my window. For a long time, nothing happened. Then slowly, the footsteps moved away. The next morning, we packed our things and left immediately. But just before we drove away, I looked back at the lake one last time. Far out in the middle of the water, something was standing there, tall, dark, perfectly still, watching the cabin, watching us, and somehow I knew it had been there the entire time, waiting for the next people who decide to spend the night at the cabin by the lake.